now we're going to transition to how are kids with disabilities scribbling. And we see in this photo is a friend of mine who's a toddler with, at the time, it is an electronic braille writer called a Mountbatten, and it's no longer made looking like this. I loved it because it had an easy to use keyboard, and then it printed out in braille right away. So it wasn't just a digital tool, it did hard copy braille. And it was a great way for kids who are blind to scribble, which was an important thing in the development of kids who are blind, because we have a tendency as teachers to be much more prescriptive with their braille writing. And so this is to illustrate about scribbling. So we're going to see a little video. This is not a grandchild of any of us, but a friend of mine. And I've known him since he was little. And this is on that tool called a Mountbatten, which is no longer produced like this. But what I want to share here, the caption is scribbling with the mark maker of their future. And that's Kelly's term, the mark maker of their future. I think that is such a brilliant statement. And if you don't take away anything else and put it in your brain, to quote us on teaching writing with the mark maker of their future. It's such an important experience. And you'll see illustrations of the way Kelly does that with kids with complex communication needs. But we're just going to take a little look here. And Ethan, I think he's 9 months here. So when we think about age and when, here you go.
Yeah, for those of you that have had little ones in your lives, you know, when does that one, if they're able to, pick up a marker, pick up a crayon, and just start scribbling. One of the, and thank you, Donna, for the compliment on the statement, and I'm going to throw it right back at her, in that one of the things that she was doing is that her granddaughter was in those same stages as students that were on Donna's caseload. And Donna, as a teacher, was looking at, how do I keep my kids with disabilities up at the same kind of rate in writing that she was seeing developmentally happen with her granddaughter? And so one of the reasons of how could you get this kid to the tool of the time and doing some scribbling. So take this in many ways. We love this video.
A little bit. You're doing good, Ethan.
Yeah.
You're done, Dottie? You go get your sandals on and go play in the bed.
Oh.
When Dawn is gone.
I love that.
I'm just going to pause it and point out how Donna is whispering to the mom. I love that. You know, that there he is reaching out to the marks that he is making on his paper and his tool, his reading and writing tool of the future.
Thanks, Kel.
Push some buttons. Can you push some buttons? I like to push these buttons over here.
I also want to point out where this is occurring, and it's occurring on the floor. So we have a $5,000 tool on the floor. And there was never a problem putting a $5,000 tool on the floor. Just saying.
So we want to give you another example. Donna, was there anything else you wanted to do with the video?
No, that was good.
So, you know, that idea of how do you get those mark makers in no matter what their alternative pencil might be. So this is me in a classroom. It's actually the classroom after school. I had been observing in this school during the day, and I went into a classroom of 5-year-olds that were doing a writing activity, except for this one girl who has complex learning needs. She was off on the side using her communication book with the SLP doing her, just keep using lots of letters, during her CFY year, right? And so they were off to the side, not doing writing. The rest of the class was doing writing. Some of the people in the class were using traditional tools. Some were using alternative tools. But this one was off doing something completely different. She was playing blocks and practicing her communication device. So when Kelly came in, I could see her. And so right there, you probably know what we're going to say. You need all kids to be doing the same thing, right? Not practicing something else in a performance way. So I circled back to this classroom and said, why wasn't this student writing at the same time everybody else was? And I got the side glance and the whisper, which I often get, which is, she can't write. I'm like, nah. Like, I understand that her hands that are very busy clapping and doing a lot of stimming things might not allow her or afford her the opportunity to write like some of the other kids were, but that doesn't mean she doesn't write. I said, she's got a communication book in front of her. This is a pod, a pragmatically organized dynamic display system. And way down in the pod is an alphabet. And so they're like, well, she doesn't know her alphabet letters. Well, let me tell you, neither did Olivia, who you watched. Neither did Ethan, who you just watched. We learn our alphabet by producing it, by playing with shapes, by scribbling. So she needs to scribble. So we got together after school. They were waiting for her mom to come pick her up after a meeting. And so what you don't see in this video are the 7 adults in a semicircle behind me, some of which are happy, some are not happy about what's going on. And all I'm doing is showing this little 5-year-old how she can access the alphabet like her friends can. Right here. Have you ever done anything with ABCs? We're gonna play an ABC game. We're gonna play an ABC game. They're way, way, way back at the back. Look back here. We're just gonna look. Now, this student has a cortical vision impairment, and one of the strategies that her local team had already worked out for her so that she would use the vision that she had to look across the page was to use a flashlight. So I'm trying to use the same strategies that they are. So I'm using the flashlight to guide her vision, and then auditorily I'm naming the things that are there. I had seen a few videos of this child before I met her. And in the videos, she would use her hands and her whole hand and reach out to touch her communication book. But I wasn't seeing that here. And I was figuring it was because, you know, she unfamiliar partner, she didn't know me. But somebody's whispering behind me and says that sometimes she doesn't pick with their hand. Sometimes she picks when you are saying things auditorily, she claps. So listen for that, or look, listen and look. These are ABCs. Those are all the alphabet. They're all back here. All of them are back here. What do you think of that? They're all back here. Look at that. All the
these alphabets. And if
Now I'm modeling
go
to her what
here,
she would do.
I get to
Pick a
turn the
group,
page, and then
turn to the
bigger.
group page.
B, C, D, E. And if I say A,
Now, this is when somebody's
somebody's
telling
going
me
to write that A down.
she might have been picking as she clapped.
Look at that.
This is why we need to be on their
the
agenda,
board.
not our own agenda.
Oh, a Y. Let's write down a Y.
So what we did for 10, 15 minutes was anything that she landed on with a hand. If I was auditorily scanning or using the flashlight, all of those things got written down on a piece of paper. And that strategy is called free writing, F-R-E-E, writing. So they get free time to write whatever they want to write. No, it doesn't matter if you've got a topic or not, whatever letter they land on gets written down, and that becomes their scribble. So we're looking at, how do we get this idea for all kids, for them to feel successful, for them to have multiple opportunities, frequency. The Dr. Gretchen Hanser, who's an occupational therapist that specializes in working with kids with complex bodies, including communication impairments, talks about this free writing. It was a part of her doctoral work when she was at University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. So she says you should give kids this opportunity every day to write, even if it's just 5 minutes. It doesn't have to be some big, long 25-minute lesson plan. Give them variety. Dr. Janet Sturm, who works in the area of writing with kids with AAC devices, says let them use 2 and 3 different keyboards within one set of time so that they can experiment with different ways of mark making.
Thank you, Kelly. I love that example. Okay, we're going to pop into teaching strategies. And this is a new frame for you to think about scribbling and mark making and infusing it into your teaching. So instead of those traditional ways of thinking about this is how I'm going to think about writing and scribbling, we're going to break it into ways you do it. And there's 4 ways we're going to talk about: finger scribbling, scribbling with implements, which is what we typically think about, collage scribbling or 3-dimensional scribbling, and scribbling. And I want to just add that this also can be a framework for the way you assess and evaluate, measure how a student is progressing, what they're doing. So it's something you can integrate and into what you already do. So think about that. So I also want to say a word about modeling and copying versus creating, because so much of the teaching we do when we're teaching writing is adults showing a child how to write and then the child copying. And I don't really know the research on this, but it kind of turns a lot of our kids, or typical kids, into copycats, if you will. And I think affects their creativity. And I think it also kind of stifles our kids with disabilities, because we may not be using their mark making of their future when we're showing about how to make a mark. So I just wanted to give you some food for thought about having kids do more creating rather than copying. So, okay, so scribbling is interaction like emergent reading. And so I want you to think about all the strategies we're going to share and think about all the interactions you can do with it, how you can play, how you can turn take, how you can do labeling and communication, and then sharing it. Oh, that was your slide, Kel. Sorry.
Donna said she didn't know the research, but here's the research article that we pulled some of this information from. And so what we want to make sure that we're doing during our writing time, and I'm going to call it writing time, even though we're scribbling, is we want to accept all levels of their writing, whatever it is. I'm going to ask them to read it back to me. And so that they tell me what it is. And yes, that includes my kids that are using low tech and high tech systems, right? What is it that you're making? And, if they're not ready to tell me, then we wait and we scribble a little bit more. And we just keep talking. We talk while we're doing it. And the talk isn't directive. And I think that's one of the differences of making scribbling into communication. It's not about directing their action. It's about talking and being a part of it, using what might look like an error as an opportunity, trying not to be too worried about the conventions of, where the line ends and whether they're using punctuation. We're just scribbling, right? They were not worried about those things as you saw Olivia scribbling on the floor with the washable markers. With with Ethan as he was tapping out on the Braille device, right? It's just about experimentation with those tools. We talk about this idea of co-scribbling, and a lot of these images that we have here in this section come from the Florida NFEC project, where they did a lot with, they did a big project in the I think about 5-6 years ago with co-scribbling, making shared meaning. We talk about shared reading, but shared writing makes meaning in that creative place. I love this image on the right where the kids are having the items in their play area labeled, so showing a different purpose for writing.
Thanks, Kel. So I think it's important to remember that every scribble tells a story. And that's a phrase from Kelly too. And I just love that. So that's another little thing you can put in your head. But there's two things about communication and scribbling and to think about, and that is the subject matter of when you're doing this together and all the communication strategies. So when you look at Kelly's example of scribbling with her student, so much around communication, right? And you had to know about how that child communicated. And what I want you to think about is that video of Olivia where, Alana and I started out by the alphabet wanting, that's pretty prescriptive and pretty old school. But what Olivia wanted to do, and what I didn't share before, is she wanted her mom to draw pictures of the family where she went for daycare. Andy was from daycare, the dog, all that, Leah, all those were people from her daycare environment. So we started out wanting Olivia to look at letters and write her name, but she wanted her scribbling and communication to be all about her daycare people. So think about that subject matter and communication, and try to not just make it our adult stuff, but more the child's orientation. So the implications about scribbling is we need to evolve and respond. I certainly have, and what I do with scribbling with young people now. Do lots of work with parents and caregivers, be in the homes and in daycare with our students who are scribbling, provide more tools, right? The tools of their future, give them access to more tools, and then work from the heart, right? And because it's about like reading, it's about, we generally don't have kids on our laps when we're working on scribbling and writing, but we do when they're reading, when they're little. And and think about that working from the heart when we do mark making and scribbling.
And I want you to recognize that this takes time. Typically, developing kids who are learning to scribble to write are freely given 2, 3, 4 years till they make a mark that somebody can read. And then another 3 years till we expect them to put that, into complex paragraphs. So you don't think that you're going to go through all of this with a student, in the course of 1 year. The other thing, and I think that neither one of us said this, is that emergent writing and scribbling can happen at any age. I have a 20-year-old that's never had an opportunity to write that's on my caseload. And we started out with scribbling, right? I met an 8-year-old that never had the opportunity. Everything was whole word, perfect writing. So we went back to scribbling to build those skills.